Hey, everybody. Happy Hockey Day in Canada to everybody outside of Montreal. Because in Montreal tonight, nobody's celebrating. The Habs lose 7-3 to the Leafs. Habs blow a 3-0 lead. And everybody's got their tail between their legs wondering what the hell went wrong. Well, is it puck luck or did the Habs just drop the ball? We'll discuss. Time to drop the puck on another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk. Hey there, Habs fans. Welcome to another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk. I am, of course, Kosta, affectionately known as Coach K. And before I go any further, let me start by giving a shout out to Dave Trendadue, who I saw today at a local store here close by. And it was nice to see him and the family out. You know, you don't get to see people that you know out with their families all that often and what we do. So it was pretty cool. And we touched base a little bit on Twitter and went back and forth. So, you know, Dave, who runs the Get Pucked podcast, give it a listen and make sure you tune in. Now, let's talk a little bit about tonight's debacle. And I call it a debacle because straight out, the Montreal Canadiens started the game just the way everybody wanted them to. They came out, they scored pretty early in the hockey game, and it was a goal early on by Kirby Dach about 5 minutes in to make it a 1-0 game. Beautiful pass between Laine, Guhle, and Dach. Boom, 1-0. The place explodes. Everybody's happy. I'm off the couch, fist pumps. Everything's great. Then we go to the latter stages of the period. And throughout, let me just preface that by saying throughout the period, Sam Montembeault kept the Canadiens at 1-0 with a few big saves early on in the game. Then fast forward a little bit later when the Canadiens get a late power play. Boom. Patrick Laine scores from his favorite spot, his 10th power play goal of the season to make it 2-0 Habs. And then just 9 seconds later, it's Josh Anderson breaking in and creating a breakaway, of his own and putting a backhand past Joseph Woll to make it 3-0. And it looks like the Canadiens are all roses and the game's going to just fly away, right? Everything's going to be great. And I think that actually got into the Montreal Canadiens' head. Biggest issue for me was the two clowns on Sportsnet. Now, I love Chris Cuthbert, don't get me wrong. When he worked for CBC and he was doing the CFL and he was doing hockey, I loved the guy because I didn't have to deal with him doing the Leafs. Now that he's doing the Leafs along with Craig Simpson, who's a former Oiler, both of those guys, I mean, it's constant, you know, Leafs this and Leafs that, and it drives me batty. And the worst thing that drives me batty, I'm a superstitious guy. I'm not afraid to admit it. Is them talking about how good Sam Montembeault was in the first period. Oh, Montembeault was great for Montreal. That's why he got his invitation to the Four Nations Cup, another tournament I really don't give a shit about. But anyway, blah, 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 blah. What happens? The Leafs score. It's 3-1. And all of a sudden, their tune changes. Oh, look, that's what the Leafs needed. Just a little change in momentum. That dreaded 3-0 lead. It's a dreaded 2-goal lead, you jackass. Not 3. Anyway, it's 3-1. Now the Canadiens have the dreaded 2-goal lead, which then drops down to a 1-goal lead when Nick Robertson deflects a pass from Oliver Ekman-Larsson straight into the top corner from the high slot to make it 3-2. Habs go to the locker room. They're all nervous. Then what happens? Well, 24 seconds into the third, Nylander comes in, scores, and there we go. At that point in time, the hockey game's over because the Leafs just drop another 4 spot on the Canadiens. You know, goals by Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Austin Matthews, beautiful clapper, by the way, on a pass from Mitch Marner that Sam Montembeault could have stopped had he not slid right by the puck. Then Steven Lorentz makes it 6-3, and David Kampf scores in an empty net to make it 7-3. At that point, the game was pretty much gone because the Canadiens had taken their goalie out with about 4 minutes left, got a 6-on-4 power play. The Leafs can throw the puck at the empty net. It doesn't matter. Anyhow, it ends up being a 7-3 win for the Leafs. But the problem wasn't what some people would say is puck luck. It's not about puck luck because Joseph Woll, after that first period, was stellar in goal for Toronto. I don't think anybody can doubt that. He was making save after save after save, 2-3 at a time to keep the Leafs in the hockey game. And then in the latter stages of the game, he was really closing the door, frustrating the Montreal Canadiens to the point where they couldn't even think about what they were doing. They were trying to put passes on sticks that weren't even there. And so you got to give a lot of credit to Joseph Woll. Much maligned as a goaltender of the Leafs because oftentimes he lets in some soft goals. He didn't do that tonight for them. He was absolutely unbeatable in the last 40 minutes of the hockey game. That's the reason why the Leafs won so handedly. Another reason why they won so handedly was the fact that Sam Montembeault went back to the same guy that we saw prior to the last few games that he's played, where he was sliding out of position, he was spinning. A goaltender who's out of control in his crease, in his movements, I mean, you saw it on the Nylander goal. Nylander's literally got Lane Hutson in his back pocket applying back pressure. You know, as a goaltender, okay, that Nylander cannot go backhand because that's where Hutson is. If he goes backhand, a little stick tap from Hutson, puck's off his stick, danger done. He's going to go to his backhand. So what happens? The minute Nylander pulls the puck over to his forehand, Montembeault slides across completely out of his net, leaving a wide open net for William Nylander to score into. I mean, it's goals like that start to make me question Sam Montembeault as a goaltender in the National Hockey League. There are games he comes out like I believe it was the Dallas game where he's absolutely fantastic, and he looks like the guy that should be the number one going into the Four Nations Cup. Again, a tournament I don't give a shit about. And then you come back to this where he's playing in front of the home crowd and, you know, is it he's playing too hard? Is he trying too hard to impress the people in Montreal? I don't know. But when he simplified his game and he stayed within his means, inside his crease, and didn't extend himself outside of the posts, he looked great. He didn't do that tonight. The Canadiens needed him to make a couple of saves as the momentum was shifting, and he couldn't do it. And it's tough to watch that. I mean, you know, the Robertson goal was from distance. It was a deflection. It was beautiful. It was great. And then after the Nylander goal, you had the Oliver Ekman-Larsson goal, which went off the tip of his glove through a screen. Max Pacioretty, of course, former Hab, providing that screen. And then you had the Matthews goal, which was a clapper from the high slot, nobody in front of him, and he slid again way out of position, like to the point where he slid so far away that he had to reach back to try to stop that puck. He didn't have to because he was on that side of the net. That's the side that Marner was coming down on. So why do you have to slide that far? You don't. What happens? At that point, it was a 5-3 game. Then Lorentz scoring. Oliver Ekman-Larsson getting an assist. He had 3 on the night to make it 6-3. And then, of course, the empty netter by count. But what the Canadiens did most in this hockey game that really irks me, and I talk about it all the time. You guys can go back, look at the old shows, and I mention it time and time again. The middle of the ice, the area between the dots. The Canadiens got away from playing in that area. They started playing along the half wall and allowing the Leafs to absolutely, completely continue to attack through the middle. If you're going to give the Leafs that kind of space for them to generate speed through the neutral zone, you're never going to win hockey games, whether it's the Leafs or any other team in the National Hockey League. It's like just just go right into Sam Montembeault and score, because that's pretty much what was happening. Nylander had free reign to go through the middle of the ice today. So did Marner. So did Matthews. Anybody who carried the puck up the middle had room to skate. And it was obvious. And it drives me nuts. And in the first period, completely different story. In the first period, the Canadiens were applying puck pressure on the puck carrier, making sure that he was forced to the outside, not giving them any type of real good scoring chances. They got a couple of them. Montembeault shut the door. The rest is history. But when they stopped applying puck pressure and they tried to back off a little bit, the Leafs just pounded them. And that's not the type of game that the Canadiens can afford to play. Through the 11 wins that they got recently, it was 11 out of 14, now 11 out of 15 that they got during this last stretch. The Canadiens were most effective when they applied puck pressure on the puck carrier and made sure they forced them to the outside from the middle. I call it hourglass defense, right? Most teams start from outside the dots, inside their own zone. They try to get in the middle as they come across the blue line. And then as a defensive team, you're trying to force them back out. So you form that hourglass, right? hence the meaning of hourglass defense. That's what you expect the Canadiens to do when they clog the middle, when they get position in the middle and they take care of the neutral zone. That's not what they did tonight. And so for somebody to say that this was puck luck, or for somebody to even say that, okay, the referees missed a couple of calls, yeah, you could say that. But you could also turn around and say, and I know specifically people are going to talk about the trip by Marner on Carrier. You can also say that Carrier actually engaged contact, threw Marner off balance, and that's the reason why Marner's stick got between his legs. Okay, granted, everybody says the player's supposed to have control of his stick at all times. Understood. But when you're the guy that comes over and initiates contact, 9 times out of 10, the referee's going to say, you know what? You threw him off balance. That's why he tripped you. I'm not calling that because he didn't do anything wrong. And that's what we saw on that play. All right? We also saw a play where Robertson threw Hutson to the ground. Okay. Lane Hutson gets involved physically and loses his balance, falls down. You're going to call Robertson on that? That's what it looked like to me. He came in to try to throw a hit and he fell backwards. Robertson was on top of him. You're calling Robertson for throwing to the ground. He didn't throw him to the ground. He basically fell on top of a player. No penalty on the play, and it was a good call. Now, Nick Suzuki losing a chiclet, that's a 4-minute penalty. That got called. You know, you saw other calls during the game. David Savard got caught for a chicken wing. And, of course, he pled innocence on the play, but you could see clearly he had Nick Robertson's stick underneath his armpits. Both of them. What's the ref going to say? No, you weren't holding it. He put it there to make you look bad. No, he didn't. So we got to get away from this whole, we're going to blame the referees for it. When the refs don't make calls, that's at all in a hockey game, that's when you start arguing. But the way this game was called tonight, they allowed the players to play. And they made the calls that needed to be made. Right? It was as simple as that. I don't think anybody should blame the referees for anything. So leave that alone. But to say that it's all about puck luck, you make your own puck luck on the ice. And the Canadiens made their own puck luck. They got chances. They had what? I think 31 shots on goal in this, 34 shots, right? 35. There you go. Both teams had 34, 30, and 35 shots respectively. They got their chances, okay? It's not to say that the Canadiens didn't have their chances to score. They just couldn't. The Leafs were getting better looks, better chances, and they were putting them in the net. It's a simple concept. Leave it at that. The Canadiens played well to start, and then the last 40 minutes just got away from them completely, including the goaltending of San Montembeau. So we got to take this, put it aside, and move on. And move on we will. I'm going to start talking about that middle of the ice again, because I always tell you guys that any team that plays outside the middle of the ice will not win hockey games. You cannot play on the perimeter and expect to win. It's a simple concept, okay? The angles that you get from the perimeter are no good to begin with, right? Unless you have traffic in front. Most of the time, they don't, all right? So you need to be able to shoot from inside the dots. Further to that, if you keep your opponent outside the dots, you're fine. So you've got to occupy the space between, right? If you're not in between the dots, what happens is the other teams can skate in and take that position on you. Simple, right? So why is it that the Canadiens, who did the job in the first, couldn't do it afterwards? Stop and look and think. And between periods, like between the second and the third, right, when everything fell off the handle, you know, when the wheels fell off, whatever acronym or euphemism you want to use. At the end of the day, in between periods, even during the game, these guys are sitting there with their tablets in their hands looking at different plays. Some might be looking at passes and where they're looking to make them. Others might be looking at defensive coverage. You're going to tell me that somebody on the Montreal Canadiens, including their video coaching staff, couldn't spot the fact that the Canadiens were giving up the middle of the ice? Everybody and their mother could see it. All the guys were trying to pass cross ice because guys were on the far side. Nobody was in the middle. The Canadiens do best when they have guys in the middle of the ice. It's simple. They do exactly what the Leafs did to them. They skate through the middle of the ice with speed, they generate, they back the defense off, and they open up space for scoring chances. Well, the Leafs did it to perfection in the second and third. The Canadiens did not. The Canadiens did in the first period perfectly, right? They got that early goal, right? They created pressure. They skated through the middle of the ice. Kirby Dach was on fire in this hockey game to start. And then what happened? They got away from it. And you saw it as that first period started to end. you saw the shift. The only reason the Canadiens managed to get those 2 goals quickly is they caught the Leafs off guard. 1 on the power play goal and 2 right off the draw, right? It was a face-off win. Puck got dumped in. Anderson takes it off the board, skates it in, boom, it's in the back of the net. Above and beyond that, the Canadiens did not play in the middle of the ice at all, right? Guys were getting the puck on their stick, and they were skating into the zone and going to the outside. Again, hourglass defense by the Leafs, and the Canadiens not doing what they need to do to maintain their positioning in the middle of the ice. So before we turn around and say anything else, all right, Montreal has to make sure to be successful, they stay inside that mid-ice lane, right? When the Canadiens control the neutral zone, when they check, when they pressure the puck carrier in the middle of the ice, and they manage to get them to the outside, the Canadiens are successful. They give their goaltender a fighting chance to stop the puck. When the shots are coming from the middle of the ice, that's where you see Montembeault struggle. And this isn't just Sam Montembeault. This was notorious for Carey Price. It was notorious for Jake Allen. Anybody that's watched the Canadiens in the last few years knows that the Canadiens would give up a lot of chances from the middle of the ice. So, if you keep the opponent out of the middle of the ice and you give your goaltender a fighting angle to stop a puck, you have success. That's not what we saw tonight. And so, again, I'm just going to say, very important. The Montreal Canadiens need to make sure they control the middle of the ice. Without that, they're not going to win. All right? Are they a playoff team? Not yet. Because they need to become more consistent in the way that they play and stop getting away from the things that they do extremely well, which is when they're in the middle of the ice, they control it. Other teams can't, right? They don't have the speed that the Canadiens do. The Canadiens can close on skaters with the puck. Other teams can't. So why not focus on the things that the Canadiens do super well and not allow them, stop going to the outside when you don't need to. Now, moving on. It was not a good night defensively for Lane Hutson. Above and beyond the fact that, he got knocked down by Robertson, like I mentioned, with no penalty call. He was in the hip pocket of Nylander when Nylander scored in the third. But the problem on that play was that Hutson was along the boards. The puck went to the slot to Josh Anderson, and Hutson didn't move. He stayed on the boards, right? As the puck went over to the slot, right, you had the defenseman on the far side. I forget who it was. I think it was Matheson. But he was over there in support on the opposite side, but there was no support from Hutson. Hutson stayed on the boards. The puck went up the middle, again, the middle of the ice, the other way. And because Hutson had it shaded across, he was behind the 8 ball and had a bad angle to come back and get Nylander. And the thing about Hutson tonight, which, a lot of teams don't exploit, and the Leafs did to their credit, is that when they pressure him in tight and they get physical on him, it changes the way he plays. That's not to say that he hasn't been able to handle the physicality, right? But he's done extremely well. Tonight was just not his night. Even if you take away the empty netter, right? Because he was on the ice for that, obviously, because the Canadiens were trying to score on the power play. If you look at the other 4 times that the pucks went in, he wasn't even there to cover anybody. On the Matthews goal, he was completely off to the side. And that's not to say that David Savard is any better, because David Savard, I think, was a -3 tonight as well. It all comes down to the fact that Hutson, right, for all the good that this kid does, right, he got an assist on Laine's power play goal. But for all the points that he puts up, he's got 37 or 38 now in the season. I believe it's 37 now. For all the points that he puts up, there are things that he needs to get better at. And he has to stop focusing solely on the offensive side of the puck and make sure he takes care of his own zone, especially when it comes to the offensive blue line. It's like playing with 4 forwards on the power play, right? Oftentimes you get caught because you're playing with 4 forwards. You don't have that defensive presence on the opposite side of the ice, 4 guys that are looking to score, and 1 guy who's back there feeding the puck to them with a little bit of a defensive presence, and that normally is Lane Hutson. When you play, though, with 5 guys on the ice, right, in non-power play situations, and you're at 5-on-5, and you've got 2 defensemen on the ice, there's no excuse for an inability to be able to get back and defend your own zone, especially when the puck's at your own blue line. If you're pushing too hard against a team like the Leafs to maintain the blue line, especially when you're a diminutive defenseman like Lane Hutson, you're going to get pounded on because the Leafs are rather big on the wing. They're not a small team. Their smallest winger is Mitch Marner, right? So if you're going to get pounded like that time and time again, you get fatigued, you make mental mistakes, you allow scoring chances. And that's kind of what happened to Lane Hutson tonight. He was focusing too much on the offensive side, being a little bit overly aggressive against the Leafs, and it cost them. And that's not to say he's going to continue to do that. Because normally what we've seen from Hutson is that he does it once, and he learns from his mistakes. Well, tonight's a learning moment for him. He needs to make sure that he is a lot more responsible at his own blue line. Stop worrying about keeping the puck in when you're being pressured as much as he was tonight against the Leafs. And learn. When there's that much puck pressure, back off a little bit earlier. Nobody's going to hold it against you if you try to defend a little bit better instead of being that offensively aggressive. Especially when you've got a 3-0 lead, you can afford to back off a little bit. You don't have to hold that blue line that strong. Those are things that a rookie defenseman will learn. So I'm not going to hold it against him, but it wasn't really a good night for Lane Hutson on the blue line for the Canadiens. Yes, he got an assist, but defensively, he could have done a hell of a lot better, and he was part of the reason why the Leafs were getting so many good scoring chances, the fact that he just wasn't defending very well tonight. And you can shit on me all you want for that, but the proof is right there in the stats. He just was not that good defensively. But somebody who is being good defensively and very quietly is Caden Guhle. I think in the first few seasons that Guhle was with the Montreal Canadiens, a lot of people expected him to be a lot more offensively inclined, right? Because of the fact that he skates like the wind, because of the fact that he covers a lot of ice, he makes a good first pass, he's got a good shot. So they kind of expected what Lane Hutson is providing for the Canadiens right now, in the sense that they could put up a lot of points from the blue line. But in the absence of that, Mike Matheson and Lane Hutson are taking care of the offensive side of the puck. And I think that Caden Guhle has really found his niche in the sense that he is playing that sort of veteran presence type guy along with Alex Carrier. Now, Carrier is doing a good job in his own right, but it's the little things that Guhle's been doing lately. His job physically along the boards, his outlet passes, his ability to help the rush, to provide offense. He's found that happy medium that defensemen often miss as far as their ability to contribute. Not only from the offensive side of things, but from the defensive side. I think Caden Guhle's been fantastic. And he's not getting enough credit, right? We are the first to shit on Guhle every time he makes a mistake, right? But when he doesn't make mistakes, we don't throw flowers at him. Well, I'm going to throw flowers at him tonight. Because throughout this entire stretch, he has been the most consistent defenseman on the Montreal Canadiens. Take away the assist by Lane Hutson. Take away the play of Alex Carrier. And just look at Caden Guhle and what he's been able to provide to the Canadiens through this stretch. Since the beginning of January, he has been the Canadiens' best defenseman, I find. If you want to argue the point, put it in the comments, but I think he's been the most consistent. He has brought exactly what the Canadiens expected him to bring to the table. And the reason for that is simple. It always takes a few extra years to develop a defenseman, right? That's the case with Guhle. As the years go by and as he stays healthier, because, again, he's been one of those guys that's been bitten on and off by the injury bug throughout his career. But he's one of those guys that when he plays consistently, you get good defense. And it shows in his stats and his numbers, right? He's not a defensive liability out there. He provides offense. He's able to clear the zone rather effectively. So I want to see him get more ice time, right? I think that he deserves it because of the fact that he plays so consistently well. I don't think he's a third pairing D. I think he's your middle D. I think that him next to David Savard would be an ideal pairing, right? But right now, David Savard is playing with, geez, I can't even remember anymore. Hang on. I'm going to look right now and I'll tell you. David Savard, well, who's he play with more? Savard is normally on the ice. He's out there a lot with Lane Hutson. Kind of explains why Lane Hutson playing like shit lately, because or tonight anyway, because David Savard has not been good defensively for Montreal. I don't even remember who Savard plays with normally. It's kind of hard because the Canadiens, I think, were playing mostly with 5 defensemen tonight. But anyway, that being said, I mean, what I was getting at is Guhle's so consistent when it comes to his play that he deserves to get a little bit more ice time, right? He's not providing the offense Mike Matheson and Lane Hutson do. Of course not. That's not his strength. But his ability to play both sides of the ice is unquestioned. And he does it consistently, and he does it well. He's physical. He skates well. He applies pressure on the rush. He doesn't get caught out of position very often, which is something you don't hear his name, right? And that's what you want from a defenseman. You only want to hear his name for the good reasons, right? And you saw it tonight with the pass that he made to Duck. That's pretty much the only thing we heard about Guhle the entire night. And that's what you want from a defenseman. And that's what he's provided for Montreal since the beginning of January. Since they pretty much got on that heater, right? So I think if the Canadiens use him a little bit more effectively and give him a little bit more ice time, things might go a little bit differently. But, with the majority of the ice being given to Matheson and Hutson, it's going to be tough. But got to throw flowers at Caden Guhle. He's quietly been the Canadiens' best defenseman in the month of January. And it's great to see because the kid deserves it. Now, as I cough because I'm fighting off a cold still, now we talk about tomorrow's game where the Canadiens take on the New York Rangers. Now, JT Miller was left off the ice by the Canucks tonight because the Canucks may very well be trading him to the Rangers. Nobody knows because there was talk about a Zibanejad for Miller trade. That fell through. Now, the Rangers are coming in. The Rangers are a complete shit show. Okay? They are not good. And, if I could talk to my friend Paul Cuthbert, and he would tell you the same thing. But Chris Drury has taken this team to a completely other level when it comes to their confidence because he's traded away Capo Caco. He traded away Jacob Trouba in what seemed to be, a complete and utter disaster, right? There are a lot of things around this team that have not been very positive. And the one thing you don't want to do to your own hockey club is bring in an air of negativity. And that's what surrounds the Rangers right now. They're inside this fog, and they don't have a way to get out. And that's great for the Montreal Canadiens. But, you want to see a competitive game, right? Because we always have fun when we watch the Canadiens play well and their opponent plays well because they normally play to their team's strengths. We didn't see that tonight, but they normally do. So if they wanted to really get away from tonight's game, playing a team with equivalent skill as the Leafs probably would have been the way to go. But that's not what happened. They're playing the Rangers tomorrow night. Doba should get the start. Canadians should get the win, but it all depends. Will JT Miller be on the ice for them tomorrow? That remains to be seen. Will the Rangers be able to compete? Because normally they come into town and Chris Kreider decides he's going to score 2 or 3 goals. The guy, since he took out Carey Price's knee, this entire city hates Chris Kreider. And I hate him even more because he continues to score against the Habs time and time again. That remains to be seen. But I'm predicting a win by the Habs tomorrow night. It should be relatively easy, but the Rangers always seem to play good games against the Habs, so we'll see. But with Dobish in goal, I'm pretty confident the Habs will come out on top. We'll see about that, and we'll see you tomorrow night.